Okay, this is a very interesting one. This fellow, you can see me sitting off to the side there in the chair. Also, there's something else I might show you at this point. On the right edge of the photograph, you can see what looks like a painting on the wall or something, a lot of little rectangles. What I did was I took a photograph, and in fact, what you're looking at is one of the photographs during each performance. Someone would come in and take a Polaroid. Then after that, after the performance, I would mount it up on the wall. So there was a documentation of what was going on. You can see that this performance was actually one of the last performances because that wall is pretty filled up with photographs. Anyway, okay, to get at this performance. Also, another thing I did, which was really interesting, they paid for their photograph. They gave me $1. And then after it was all over, I signed it and returned it to them. So they had sort of a documentation of my performance that they were the performer. So I felt it was really funny for me to sign their performance and sort of twisted it around again. This guy was a sculptor, and he built this large steel box that hung from the ceiling. And there was this other piece of steel just sort of floating off to the side. And I came in and everything was sitting there, and a lot of people were waiting. We waited for about 5 minutes. They had 10 minutes to complete the performance. And then he just walked in very casually with this welding stuff on. I think he was even just welding in the other room. And then when the time came, he just got up and walked in because he actually smelled of the fumes that one smells when you weld. And he just walked in, picked up that big steel thing that was hanging from the ceiling, leaned it back, and then just threw it at the box. When it hit the box burst open, was like hinged, and fell down. And there was another box inside that had, I imagine, dry ice in it. And it was just smoking. And it came down and just poured down. It was just very beautiful. That's all there was to it. But it was very dramatic for him to walk in and just pick this thing up. And, we didn't know what was going to happen. And then it was very subtle. Made this big clash, but then it was very subtle. The smoke just poured out. This woman came in. She was into dance and theater and things like that. And when I came in, there was some branches stuck up on the platform, a couple different clamped to the platform. I pulled up my chair and sat down. She came in a costume that looked very much like a spider, and she had a lot of yarn. And she came in and just crawled around this piece, weaving this web around these. It was very beautiful because her movements were incredible as she worked her way through and around. Not too spider-like, but very beautiful. This guy was great. He's some administrator, and he comes in, and he puts down this record player, pulls out this old-time record, puts it on it, and it's some old-time opera, And he sits back and he's listening to this opera, right? And it's going, and getting into this real heavy stuff. And he's getting into it, and he's sort of half singing himself, and he just played about 3 records, and it was incredible. He was so into it. And one time there, and a real heavy, he's right at the point where he's just so into it, and he'd go with it. He wanted to be an opera singer at one time in his life. And these are like his greatest loves are these 20 records he has of some incredible old-time singers. And every once I was talking to his wife, and she says, what he did was exactly what he does about once a month. He just has to go in there and play these records. It was his old dream, And he did it right in front of people, and it was just incredible. This one was a pretty scary one for me. I came in, sat down, and some people came in and put this welding, it's sort of like it's a welding shield that you would put between welders and people working out there so they wouldn't catch the light in their eyes. And they completely entrapped me in this welding shield. And I'm just sitting there, and everybody's very quiet. And then I heard some heavy-footed person come in, take a couple steps, step. Very quiet. And then I hear click. It almost sounded like a gun, a trigger of a gun. A hammer of a gun going. what's that? Click, click. It kept getting closer and closer. And there was a person, I took over the job from someone else who they wanted to get rid of really bad, and the guy was going sort of half nuts. He was heavy into dope. He was pulling off really awful teaching. Like one project he had was to build something that you would send through the mail. You would enter a show, you'd insure it, send it through the mail, but it was designed so it would fall apart. And then when you got to the other end, you'd get the insurance money. Kind of really negative, backwards thinking. And this is the kind of stuff he was into. And so I got his position, and I was always sure that he was, a little bit angry with me. And that I came along, and the goody-goody came along and took away his position. And but I wanted to invite him to the performance, to show him that it didn't mean anything to me. Come on, come and get tough if you want. I don't care. And so I thought it was him, because I kept hearing this, thing going click, click, and he kept getting closer and closer, and started walking around it. Turned out this wasn't the case at all. It was another student coming in and taking photographs, right? But my mind was just going wild. At one time, I was sitting there, and I almost imagined an arrow all of a sudden going. And then, it was taken down, and I went and laid down. Oh, this woman was fantastic. She's an actress. Was taking a beginning class from me. And first someone came in and laid down a few pillows and made like a couch sort of arrangement. And she came in and sort of walked in. She looked a little sad. She had a wig on. She didn't look like the same person. She walked in. She looked a little sexy. She came in and stood next to the platform, and sort of like she was uncomfortable, didn't quite know where to go. And she opened up her purse and started reading a letter. It was about sort of a letter from her boyfriend. It was just sort of a letter, but it tasted more like he was more in love with his motorcycle than he was with her. Something like that. It's very subtle, but just really nice. And when he started talking about the motorcycle, and she'd get all slow, and she'd look at it, like almost like the other woman or something. She was just beautiful. And she finished the letter, and then she burst out in tears and dove on this couch and cried. My heart was going. Tears were coming. She cried. You couldn't cry like that. You'd have to know how to cry like that. She was just fantastic. And she was into crying, or she beat the thing. And then she, her whole body started getting all messed up and shaking. And, and then she would slowly settle down, and just her foot would be going, And then she'd start up again. And then she got up and, sort of composed herself and left. And I really rested after that one. This was one of the real sweetest ones. It was really personal. This woman was a student of mine in many classes. And I'm sure every student is aware of this, and every faculty is definitely aware of this, especially when the student is of the opposite sex, right? There's sometimes something that happens across between the teacher and the student. There's a love or something that shoots across. You're aware of it, and you're being cool, and the students be aware, and she's being cool. But there's just this warm feeling going back and forth. And it's very lovely if one, keeps it in a nice, sweet place. It's just incredible. And a lot of teaching can go back and forth through this. Well, anyway, she was a very shy girl. No one ever saw her legs. She'd always wear big pants or something like that. Well, anyway, so she was scheduled for the performance. I didn't know it, but the place was packed because she's such a shy woman that people didn't even believe that she was going to do a performance, right? And what was she going to do? And I guess there was a little sense of this thing. Other people could see what was happening between us, although we were very, very proper about the whole thing. I was married at the time and stuff. So she walks in a little short skirt. That alone was enough to just about wipe everybody out. and little high heels. She comes out and she has a little pan, and over her arm she has a towel. And she walks up and sits down with her back to the audience, so they really can't quite see. And she's very close to me, actually a lot closer than this appears here. And she proceeds to shave her legs with the utmost care and delicacy. It was amazing. And then afterwards, she stood up and sort of, straightened her dress a little bit, looked at her legs from one side, and sort of turned around, looked at her legs from the other side, and looked at me like, "What do you think?" And I sort of smiled, and then she went out. I'll never forget. Just so lovely. This is a friend of mine, John DeMarchi. He was a technician, and he had a piece in the show where there was a big piece of steel that was being bent by levers from the floor, and block and tackle to the ceiling and everything. And he's into building all this contraption stuff, so he built all his own pulleys and everything. He's a woodworker and stuff like that. And that's what the piece was that he had in the show. So when he came, he became, in a sense, this board that was being bent. And another person came in and hooked up another set of pulleys in it and stuff to him, and then bent him up, just like his other piece in the show, which was really quite delightful. I don't know what that one was. We'll let that one slip by. Oh, this is a guy who bicycles a lot. He's sort of a traveler. And he would commute from San Francisco on bicycle a lot. And so he just worked it out so that when he came up, he would arrive just at the right time. So he just arrived at the right time. He opened up his pack and he talked about the things he had in his pack and why he carries them. Things like that. And then he just picked up his stuff and took off. What was really nice about these performances, you didn't have to do an aesthetic statement. It didn't have to be big art. It just took whatever little part of your daily life you wanted to expose. You just exposed it, and it kind of made it special. And, in the end, every moment is very special. It doesn't have to be just the big aesthetic ones or the big... This woman, but then some people did try to do, big involvements. This woman had a little bird cage with a very strange sort of sculptural shape in it. And she came in, sort of made up like a bird, and opened up the cage and took this thing out and gave it to me. That was very strange. This one, no one came in, and I was waiting and waiting and waiting. And then the lights went out. And then all these people started coming in. I think they gathered up everybody in the whole school, it seemed like. And they all walked in about 8 or 9 abreast, the width of the platform, and just walked right in, up over the platform, and then just sort of came by me. And as they came by, they said, "Hi, Don, hi, Don." People would lean and say, "Hi, Don." And they just kept coming by and coming. It seemed like thousands. People would get back in line, that were close to me would not be close to me. I didn't catch hardly any of that. I saw a couple of people twice. But it was incredible. They just kept pouring by me. And they all left. It was sort of dark, so I could just barely sort of see them. There was a very sweet friend who, he thought I was the only guy who was going to be in the room, right? He was just learning guitar, and he was going to show me how some of the things he learned. And he came in with about 30 people. And he sat down, and he was bright red with embarrassment. You could see the sweat pouring off him, and he battled through 2 pieces. And later he told me it was the best he's ever played. But, you know, he could hear it nervous. It was so lovely because it wasn't somebody coming in doing something very slick. It was just somebody just trying really hard to do his best. And that really was the performance. Didn't care what he was doing. He just happened to come through a guitar. But he was just up there, just giving it his best, man. And the sweat was pouring. It was fantastic. I rested a long time after that. I think I actually became a piece of these people during these performances. A lot of times in art, you don't know what you're going to get. You get some pretty special things sometimes, like that soapbox derby. You know, all of a sudden, you're a hero. You know, if you've never been a hero for a moment, you have no idea what that feels like. It has its own structure. It's incredible. This woman here had this incredible collection of dolls, and she just came in and exposed her collection to us. This guy was a painter at another school, and he came in, and he's just a funny little guy, and he came in stretching this canvas, and actually he had his class come over, because it was that time during the semester where you teach them how to stretch a canvas, right? It was, you know, it was right near the beginning of the semester. And he came in and he just screwed that up so bad. In the end, he just threw it away and walked out. But he did it in such a funny way. He kept measuring things just slightly off, right? And he'd go around and he knew something was wrong, right? And he was just lovely. It was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. It's exactly how not to stretch a canvas. I had a class called Advanced Experimentation Design. Is that what it was? Well, something like that. And, no, Advanced Experimentation in Art, that's what it was. And I said, well, next Wednesday you all have to come and spend an hour and a half on no, I think I said 3 hours on the platform. That's all I'm telling you, and I'm going to be there watching. And so, there, you know, it was about 8 or 10, I don't know how many people in the class. And also, this was the time of year that they come around and somebody sits in your class to see how you're doing as a teacher, right? So I invited 2 faculty members to come and see my class. Didn't tell the students it. So it was pretty outrageous. I mean, they just come with boxes of stuff, and people had lunches. One guy brought a TV, and I mean, you know, they got underneath big blankets. They did. It was just absurd. It was 3 hours of just total absurdity. You know, people set up little rooms. People practice their guitar. Well, you know, it was great. It was really funny. And her mother made quilts, and she's the only daughter that still makes quilts. And she came in and sat down and on a rocking chair, and she rocked, and she was quilting, and then she told us about this, you know, about her mother and how she used to make quilts, and how she's the only daughter that still makes quilts, you know, she's making this quilt. It was just really sweet. Then she left, and later and she said, "Was that okay?" This is perfect. This woman come in and very carefully peeled an apple, you know, without breaking the skin, you know, all the way to the end. And then sat down on the edge of the, just sort of her back to me, just on the edge, and ate it and left. That was really nice. What is that? I can't make that out. I don't know. This was about maybe 4 years ago, so some of these I might have forgotten. This one came down and she was dressed in a very traditional outfit for calligraphy, and she did a piece for me, and she did a letter or something. And what happened was that she had been doing this a lot of her life, you know, maybe 3 or 4 years before, and she had gotten away from it. And when I gave her this invitation, it got her back into it. And that was very sweet. She did a very beautiful thing and gave it to me. I think it was good luck or something. This guy came in and used the situation. He was photographing. He liked to do photographs, panoramics, like we go all the way around. Then he would show them in a gallery where he would put the photographs all the way around the small room. And he came in, just set up his camera, used the situation to take photographs of this room and people sitting around. This was the student that I had for about 3 semesters, could never finish this project. I said, I got to give, you're going to have to do something if you want this grade. She said, well, I don't have time. I said, well, come to my performance and finish it. So she came and finished it there. It was really kind of silly, but this was a special performance that I didn't know about. I'm laying there at rest, and all of a sudden, I've been laying for about 15 or 20 minutes. I'm just about ready to get up, and all of a sudden I feel this shuffling of people coming in the door. It's not regular sort of walking. It's just very strange. High voices, low voices, and they all go back to the restrooms, straight through to the restroom. Then they come out of the restrooms and they're milling around. They're talking. I can hardly hear what they're talking about. They don't seem like they make too much sense at times. And then things start calming down, and someone says, well, this is something that was very interesting. When someone would look at me when I was resting, my eyeballs would move all over the place. Otherwise, I would just be pretty much motionless, except, very slight breathing. I'd be incredibly relaxed. But my eyes, when someone, even if, it didn't make any difference if I knew that or not, I could tell someone was looking at me because my eyeballs started moving. Well, somebody said, look it, he's asleep. He's dreaming. You can see the rapid eye movement. Things like this. And one time I was laying there and I could smell this perfume that was awful. And so intense that a face must have been right up next to me, And these people kept getting closer and closer. And, they didn't sound very smart. It turned out that what it was old people's home. And a lot of the people were senile and had a lot of physical problems. They were in wheelchairs or they were hobbling around. And they were just having a great time. Just like little kids. And it kept getting more and more involved. Finally, somebody was watching the play said, don't touch his nose, don't touch his nose. He's part of the art show. And stuff like that. And so I could just imagine. And then more rocking and rocking. And then I could hear somebody say, yeah, come on, get on, it's great. And it kept stacking on. And the photographer wasn't around. And people are looking for the photographer. Get the photographer. And apparently they all got up there and laid down on the platform alongside of me. But no one touched me. And that one guy sitting in the chair sat there the whole time like that. He never moved, they said. Sat there just sort of looking at me. It was an incredible experience to be in a room with your eyes shut and all you can do is hear and feel and smell and know all this stuff is going around and the imagination, what is it? This lady came in and she's a sort of a cute woman who likes hats. And she went through her whole collection of hats and put them on and sort of posed her face with a hat. This woman, very shy. We're very close, and she sort of switched it around for me. She looked and looked and looked to try to find a chair like mine, but couldn't find it. But when I was in rest one day, she came in and sat down and, like I would normally sit, and watched me at rest. And her performance was very, very intimate because no one else knew what was going on. And then she had the person come in and photograph. Then I got up and saw her there, and I came in, and then I sat down alongside of her. We sat there very quietly for a little while. And then she said thank you and got up and left. This guy came in, he's an administrator, and took a photograph of one of the paintings on the wall, but went through it in a real special way, the way he opened up the tripod and everything. He had this pipe, and composed it, and took the photograph and left. This one she did a little performance dealing with witches. It was very, very powerful. She's a feminist, a very strong feminist. When she was in my classes, like about 5 times today, I referred to. and I thought I'd let it. I was getting away with it. But when she was in the class, and I'd say he, she would say, "Ain't I included?" So she was a real tough feminist, and I enjoyed her very much. And she came in and did a little rap about the witches, and how they were trying to become enlightened, and apparently they had a technique or whatever. I don't know anything about witchery, but she had a very sweet sort of thing about the witches, and in the end she says, and they burned them. And she lit some candles and went away. It was a very powerful piece. Made you think twice about some of that, and how maybe we missed the whole point. This guy was a professor there, and he apparently was in the Second World War, and he came in and on a microphone he talked about like an attack. He was a bomber. He was the guy that dropped the bomb, so he sat up front of the bomber. Low-flying aircraft. And in the background there was this tape going on, with all these sounds of war. And he sat up there and very poetically would describe the landscape as they came in over the hedges and things like that. Like it wasn't war at all. He was just talking about coming in and the beautiful, the way the fields were lined up and how you'd come over. It was just incredible. And he was caught in the situation of being in war, having to do this act, but he didn't stop it from allowing him to still absorb, all the beauty that happens right in the middle of even war. He was incredible. It was a very, very powerful performance. These people just came in looking goofy, turned around and walked back out. Oh, this guy was too much. I didn't know if I was going to survive this one. He came in, he was another sculptor. And I know he was going to just try to see how far he could go with me, without me getting involved. And he came up and he laid a bunch of pieces of glass. First, underneath my chair, he laid this large piece of glass, and he had a series of pieces of glass going up on the platform. Then he came out with gunpowder. He poured gunpowder underneath my seat. And then he put a little stream of it right up on the thing. And he kept smiling at it as he came around, and he just laughing like, "Oh, Potts, I'm getting you now. you set yourself up, and I'm going to just do you in, And I'm just trying to be real cool, just sort of watching, and all this thing. And he goes up there and he lights the sucker, right? And it's going, shh. And I'm saying, "What am I going to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm just going to sit here," right? And he goes, shh. Whoa, And I felt a little heat here and there, and people jumped. A couple of people screamed and everything. The bottom of the seat was just all black and everything, but it didn't do me any damage. And he sort of knew that it was going to be okay. But the photographer caught it right in the middle of the blast. You see, I was just very calmly looking down. And it really went off. Then after that, he had a large balloon that he blew up. One of these big balloons that, you send up to the sky with a wire, Anyway, big balloon. And he filled it up with this vacuum cleaner, so it made a lot of funny in the beginning and everything as he filled it up, which was really nice. And it just so happened that day, a whole bunch of ladies from San Francisco, and a bunch of docents from the San Francisco Museum were coming up and just checking out their spaces. And they just walked in on this, right? Saw the explosion, everything. They're the ones that did all the screaming and stuff. Then he blew this whole thing up, this big thing, about 8 feet in diameter, and then he bounced it up in front of him a couple of times. The whole scene just shifted from this real dynamic, sort of scary thing to this very light and buoyant sort of thing. He bounced it, and then he bounced it to all the people, and they bounced it. And it was bouncing around, and it was just this sort of, we were in the back watching this whole thing, and it bounces off to her. And it's like, all you could see in her face, like, God, I can be part of this, sort of like, but at the same time, she doesn't quite know what to do. And she's trying to let things down, and she really wants to do this right. And she goes, and she has fingernails, and it goes, BAM! This was probably a real courageous thing for her to do and all this stuff, and it blows up. And she felt so bad. Like I wrecked it, you know. And of course she didn't, you know. She was probably one of the most sweetest parts of the whole performance. But, you know, through her description, she sort of felt she wrecked it or something. And a few people come up to her, and she was almost in tears. It was very sad, but very beautiful at the same time. And that was the end of that. This person didn't show. And I can't remember how it went, but there was a lot of people hanging around, so I knew that the non-showingness was the piece. And then a little later, just as I got up to leave, she handed me a note. It was this poem having something to do with that sometimes it always doesn't work out like you'd like. People don't come when you think they're going to come. Something like that. You know, you know, you could wait forever and all this kind of, it was just very interesting. It just so happened that these two happened the same day. And then afternoon, this guy came in, sat down in a chair, had this tape recorder, turned it on, then got up. He said, I'm going to go out and have a cup of coffee. I'll be back in a minute, Don. And he gets up and walks out. And just as he walks out, the tape recorder says, "Where's he going?" Did that guy leave me again? Am I going to have to do this alone? You know, and so this guy, which is his voice coming out of this tape recorder, is going, well, you know, and he just kind of said, "Would you like to hear some music?" Singing, "How you like this?" Just, and it's real ridiculous, funny stuff, you know. And is he coming back yet? Would somebody look out the window, and if he's out there, tell him to come in, because it's getting embarrassing, you know. He went on, and finally said, "Are you guys still in here? This is absurd. You know, I'm just, you know, what are you doing here?" You know, and just went through a whole series of trips like this, which were really nice, and then just sort of ended, "Well, I don't know about you, but this is enough for me," and just click. And then the guy walks in with his cup of coffee, picks up the stuff, and leaves. This guy did a very sweet thing. He's a model for figure drawing. And he came in, I said, "How did it go?" I'm not sure if there was music or what. But he would come in, and he would sort of like, he was also a dancer. And he came in and he sort of danced around in these shapes, and he had this stool that he played with. And then he'd find himself in a particular shape on the stool, and he'd stop and he'd hold it for a while. Like it was on stop action, like now's the time to draw. You know, like when you have figure drawing class, all of a sudden the figure takes a pose, and it's something that normally is moving constantly, right? And then all of a sudden you just sort of stop action, and there's the pose. A lot of times the poses aren't very powerful because they're usually, you know, they're in a relaxed state. One can't hold a dynamic state very long. This is one real nice, useful thing with TV. I wanted to do it in an anatomy class I had, was to actually use the TV and catch let's say, an athlete or something in positions, freeze it, and then draw from the TV. But anyway, that's just a thought that you might pursue here. But then he would take off part of his garment, because in our class he would pose in the nude. So he would take off something, and then he would dance again and stop again. So he would go through this whole procedure till he was totally nude. And I guess this was the totally nude shot, and this is the position that he took. And then he went back and slowly put his clothes on and went through the whole thing again. And when he was totally dressed, he made one more pose in that position and then left. It was really quite nice, very dry, but very beautiful. I mean, what he was talking about was, I think, his side of it, the model side of it. And it was very beautiful, very beautiful. This was on Halloween Day, and she came in and made herself up like a little cat, and then left. This was an incredible performance. This was a student of mine who was a very close student. I would say my student. You know, you have those every once in a while. And he came in, confronted me. He stood on the platform first and made a little speech, having something to do about, it was about art, and one should not resist. One should just let go and let it happen, right? And I heard that word resist, right? And I had a feeling it was going to come my way. Then he walks over in front of me and he started getting very nervous. And he looked at me for a long time, and then two other people came up on either side of me. Also his very close friends and close friends of mine, advanced sculpture students, stood on either side of me in a sort of a threatening way. They were sort of a little close, like they were going to do something. And I stood there looking at him, and he said, Don, I'd like you to loan me your body. I said, oh God, what does this mean? And I just went through my mind, well, I'm not supposed to participate, so if they touch me, I'll just go limp. So the two people on either side went to grab me, and I went limp, man. They almost lost me. And they got me. And they picked me up and they carried me on the platform, and I was totally limp. And they almost cracked my head at the last minute. They caught my head as they were laying me down. Visqueen, transparent transparent plastic, a film. They just wrapped me up, and then they tied me all up in a very comfortable position. And that was a real incredible experience, to be totally taken care of. I mean, they, when they rolled me over, they had to make sure my head, was not dangling in certain ways. They put my arm in the position it should be, so it didn't get caught underneath and things like that. So I was just totally being manipulated by these two people. And then they wrapped me up, and it gave me a real nice feeling to be, held, with these ropes. So when I laid there, the ropes held me in this just real nice position. And then the two other students picked up plastic and put it on either end to make it sort of like a semi-private space, yet you could still see in. And then he lit a candle and laid down alongside of me. And just laid there alongside of me for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, quite a long time. And then got up, and they unraveled me, and then carefully put me in the position that I usually took. What they thought. I was a little funny, as best as they could, and just left me there, and then went off and left. It was incredible. It was sort of like, you have this teacher-student relationship, and I guess the student never really has the teacher. Sometimes, if it's real close, I'm sure the student, I had that. I knew what he was doing. It was like you want to have that teacher for just for your own for a while, just to stay here and just be with that teacher, just for a little while. And you have that with Maharishi. Wouldn't you just love to just sit next to Maharishi for a while, just sit there. Not about anything special, but he can't get away. He's got to sit next to you for a little while, right? And you just sit there. You don't have to talk about nothing. Just be in that presence for a while. And he sort of did a thing like that. It was really, I just felt so honored through that whole thing. It was incredible. This is a security officer. He came in, he told, over his walkie-talkie, he told everybody that, that it's disturbed unless there's an emergency for about 5 minutes, that he was doing the performance that he explained that he was going to do earlier. Then he set down his walkie-talkie, and then he started reading Ulysses. And, here's this cop-looking figure, right? And he's reading it's just flowing out of his mouth. He was incredible. Apparently he was a poet and all that, and no one knew. And it was pretty amazing. This is another sculptor student of mine. He was a previous sculpture student, and I invited him, even though he wasn't in school. And he built this device. It was like a framework, and it had two things that came to the center, and a lot of spring mechanisms. He came in and sat down between the two, had his back against one, his hand against the other, and then he slowly pushed it apart. And there was like a little ratchet mechanism on one side that it would click into. The other side was just a sort of spring that his back would give into. And as he'd go along, like that. And then when he got to a certain point, then he would like change position. until this was like the final position when he was flat on his back. And he had his hands, his feet were against the sort of the bouncing spring, and his hands were trying to push the rod to its final position. And of course, all along, it's building up pressure and pressure. And at this point, and that's a very awkward position, you can imagine pushing in that direction. And so his whole body shook, and he kept sliding back and forth as he was trying to get it into the last position. It was very powerful. Finally, it clicks into position, and he just sort of goes limp. He gets up, walks around, and you knew he was working hard and all that, but for some reason it wasn't totally convincing until he got up, walked around, and pulled up the plunger, and the thing went wham back into its original shape with this incredible force. And it was a very, very powerful performance. This woman came in and sort of like drew a little portrait of me and then tore it up because she said it was lousy. She was too nervous, she said. Oh, this is great. This woman is an art history student. And who did the piece? It was a goat with a tire around its center, sitting on a platform. Pardon? Okay, Rauschenberg, right. She comes in and she's giving a lecture on Rauschenberg. And on the slide projector is shooting this particular thing on that image of the piece I just described, Rauschenberg on the thing. And there's a bunch of hay sitting on the platform. And as she's talking, somebody's playing around with the tape, and her words are coming out again, and they're overlapping each other, and they're playing around with sounds, right? So you can hardly hear what she's talking about, and she's still talking. And pretty soon, someone brings in this goat and puts it on the platform. And as she's talking, the thing's getting further and further absurd. This goat just sits there and starts eating the grass. And then finally, the sound stops, and the slide goes off, and she leaves, and all that's remaining is this goat eating grass. It was very nice. I was really excited because she's an art historian. She's never, as far as I know, never tried to do any art and everything. And it was a very strong performance. I think what was the most exciting part about this whole idea of this type of performance is I set up a stage for other people to come and do things. And it just gave a lot of people an incredible chance to do something, anything. And there was no there's no heaviness about it. It could be anything. Like this woman came, she's a real fine sculptor. She could have done incredible things, and she decided to just come and knit. This guy's a faculty member that just loves to get in front of class and screw around. And he just came as a clown and played a ukulele in the most absurd way you could imagine. Well, this is a printmaker that she was doing a lot of shirt forms in her prints. And she came in and just ironed one of her shirts. She actually came in and ironed one of her prints, is what it was, that had gotten wrinkled in her portfolio. This guy made a sort of a triangular box with a silhouette of him on it in 3 different views, and then he stepped inside and stood behind the silhouette. This thing said something like, be careful, this place is going to be demolished any moment, or something like that. And then he came in with this big hammer and he destroyed something in the middle. And he was really lucky because one piece flew out and planted in the wall. No one got hit, and it didn't hit any of the pieces, artwork in the room. He pressed it a little too far. It's an old friend of mine. He's a machinist. He worked in, over in science lab or something like that. And one of the things was they were supposed to give me $1. And what he did, he snuck in one night and he took one of the bolts from, of the caster. He took one of the bolts away, and no one noticed it. But that night he drilled it out, put $1 inside the bolt, and then sealed the bolt. Pressed fit another piece of metal over the bolt, put the thing back. So that as far as anyone was concerned, it was just the same old bolt. So when he came in to do his performance, he came in with a little toolkit. and he drilled a hole in the top of the bolt. Well, the material he put on there was soft. The bolt originally was very hard, but he just quite easily drilled a hole right into this bolt, And then he tapped it out, and then he, put in another device, screwed it in, and then he popped out the top. He reached inside with a pair of tweezers and pulled out a dollar bill. Came over and handed it to me and said, "Thank you." That's really nice. This is a painter in the department, and he sat down and looked very much like he was drawing my portrait, because he'd look at parts of my body and he'd be working and working. He's an incredible drawer, and when he finished, he gave it to me, and it wasn't a drawing at all. It was a written description of what I looked like. It was fantastic. He talked about, how my, the axis of my body and, the different parts that crossed. And he's one of these very academic teachers that have all those beautiful words, this and that, juxtaposed, and all, these real sweet words. And it was just lovely. It was another type of portrait, totally abstract. I think that's the last one. Yeah. I don't know. Does anybody have any questions? I guess that's what it would be.
Don, I just wanted to say that it was interesting watching you. Here we are sitting in the audience watching you watch yourself on a platform, watch yourself on the television, watching other people on a platform. And every once in a while we see ourselves in the audience, and so the whole thing becomes kind of a self-referral situation, and you set up a performance here.
Right, yeah. Thank you, yeah. I think that happens all the time. Here, this is very nice because it's so formal. It really does that for sure. I think if one can be that alert in his life, one can see that going on all the time. It's always a performance on a performance on a performance. And it can just be special all the time. Any other questions?
Just a quick question. I was just wondering, it seems like this performance would have gotten pretty popular. How did it go as it progressed, and did you get big crowds of people come every day?
It would go in and out. A lot of it had to do with the popularity of the person doing the performance. Don't forget, this was during regular school time. Regular classes are going on, so there's that problem. But later, people came up and told me that, wow, I sure appreciated the opportunity you gave me. And in fact, some faculty members were talking about maybe doing this yearly, and I don't think anybody has ever done it again, but it was really well received. What I really liked about it was that it was so low-key, so subtle. I'm actually making it more exciting than it even was. It was so subtle, so quiet in a way, except for those, that were, pretty dynamic. But it was just something that happened every morning and afternoon. And I thought there's something lovely about that, not making too big a deal out of things, yet making them a little bit special. Sort of sneaks up on you. You happen to be by, you watch the performance. If not, you'd hear about it, or maybe you didn't even know about it. But you can't make all the performances. What's going on outside the door? Maybe something far more profound than what's going on in this room. But we happen to be in this room, so this is the performance. This is where you are right now. So it had that sort of aspect. Where you were is where you were. If you caught the performance, you caught it. If you missed it, you missed it. Nothing lost,
Interesting, because this is just an extension of the experience that we had with Jack Burnham when he was here a couple of weeks ago when he was talking about Duchamp. And one of the points that he brought out was that all of life is art. And Duchamp felt that life should just be a ritual, that all of life, everything we do is really a ritual act of creativity. It's an act of making art. And these people were doing that in a very personal way.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of maintenance in life, which may not be art. When you're just sort of taking care of this and taking care of that. I think all of art can be art, but it has to do with your level of awareness, your level of evolution. At a point, yes. Depends on how expanded your awareness is. I mean, it was art, you know, for you when you talked about, when you saw this relationship. You weren't just watching, you saw what was happening here. For me, at times, it was art because I slipped into spaces that I hadn't quite slipped in before. I was hoping that I could use this situation, you know, that something might happen. As I talked, I was listening, I was leading it, letting it go, listening to you, feeling you guys, and stuff, using this situation. But it has a lot to do with your level of evolution. I had a hard time. I mentioned yesterday, what was art? Was really very confused in the matter. And then Maharishi made a statement that art directly expresses the level of evolution of the artist. Directly expresses the level of evolution of the artist. And with that statement, then I understood what art was again, and I went back into the whole thing. You may do a very profound art that a lot of people won't even understand, because you can only experience on the particular level of evolution you are too. Einstein could say something very profound and you wouldn't know what he was talking about. And if he tried to say it so that you could understand it, then what would he be saying? Yet on another hand, someone like Maharishi can say something and you can pick it up at just about any level you want. But of course, you're really not picking up the most profound stuff unless you're on a level of being perceived, can perceive on that profound level. So for me, the most important thing for me to do as an artist was to expand my awareness, to become more profound. So I'm not concerned with wooing the art audience or the art world. I'm more concerned with amount of wooing or whatever. You know what I mean?
How specifically, Don, has your experience with TM and the cities changed your vision of what you'd like to do with art?
I knew I'd get that question.
You led right into it.
Well, first of all, it allowed me to be an artist again. When I was confused and I was doing the cars, hearing Maharishi speak, plus all the experience that I had, through meditation and everything, I could hear what he was saying. He said a few words, but I knew what he was saying because I had experienced it. Then I also wrote this thing and presented it to him at Humboldt, somewhere along, and it was there were 1,000 people there, and I was scared to death. My wife at the time said she didn't even recognize my voice. It was so strange. But I really wanted to read this thing and find out if I was on the track or not. And I asked him if I could make a statement, and I had a question, and he wasn't so hot on the idea of a statement because everybody was getting up and trying to say how great they were, And so I said, it's short, and I have a question. He says, all right, okay, and so I proceeded to read the statement. I don't have it on the tip of my tongue right now. It's in my catalog. I guess no one has it here. But it spoke about, how does it go? Well, anyway, let's forget it, because if I don't say it right, it'll probably sound very strange. But what happened was, in the end, after I had finished, I quickly sat down, because I couldn't even handle standing up in front of everybody anymore. I quickly sat down. I looked through the crowd, and Maharishi was rocking, and his eyes were shut, And he says, my question was, did I get the point? And he was rocking and back and forth, and he sort of giggled, and he says, I think you got it, Not the way he would say it, I can't say it. He says, I think you got it. Chills up my back, and then he said, and very beautifully said, or something like that, which really blew me away. And then after that, I believed in the things that I believed in. All I needed was that. That was nice. I'm glad I had that confirmation. And So that was a very important part, because that's something directly between you and your master. The technique is far more profound than doing art. At one time I used to say that it's nice doing art because one can have a technique in action as well as a technique, in meditation was more inaction. But then the cities came, and that's very much action. But then you can only do that a certain amount of time a day, right? So you still got a whole bunch of other time during the day. Why not have a technique that works there too? So I still think art is a very, very important thing. One thing I would say is that the cities and meditation are so powerful that one forgets about art after a little while, and then, because you've got this other thing which is so much more powerful and so much faster. But I'm ready to get back into art again, because it's not so much of a technique, it's also a very sweet dharma. I love to build, and when I build, I'd love to build on the sweetest level possible. And nothing sweeter than the next, than that next level that you haven't tasted yet. My life is pretty sweet now, but I know it could be sweeter. I can taste it being sweeter. That's what I want to expose. I think that's good enough.